A rusty, dented tin can, brightly blue and featuring a grinning cartoon squirrel, lay absurdly out of place beside a glacial stream. It was a jarring speck of artificiality in Elias Thorne's world, a forgotten testament to some tourist's carelessness from Willow Creek, or perhaps even farther afield. Elias, a man whose face was etched with the wisdom of sun and wind, rarely noticed such trifles anymore. His gaze typically swept across the vast, ancient expanse of the Cascade Mountains, which he called home. He had lived here for 58 years, every cliff and pine needle a familiar part of his existence. His cabin, built with his own hands from sturdy logs, nestled against the ceaseless murmur of the stream, a solitary refuge. For decades, he had been the quiet guardian of the forest, his only companion, his daughter, Lena. Lena, barely 20, moved through the wilderness with the quiet grace of a deer, her life intertwined with the rhythms of nature, far from the nearest town of Willow Creek. Her days were filled with gathering berries, checking traps set for small game, and helping her father tend their modest home. She knew every trail, every whisper of wind through the pines, every sound of the forest's creatures. Her hands were strong yet nimble, her eyes sharp, accustomed to the shades of green and brown, to sudden movements in the shadows. She had never known another life, and the thought of bustling, crowded Willow Creek felt as alien to her as another world. Her father, Elias, had taught her not only survival, but a deep respect for nature, its laws, its beauty, and its ruthlessness. He often said the forest provided all one needed, but demanded vigilance and humility in return. Lena heeded these lessons, absorbing them until they became part of her very being. She had no friends in the conventional sense. Her companions were the rustle of leaves and the flight of an eagle, and her conversations with her father were a world unto themselves, rich with wisdom and stories. Unfortunately, whispers of Lena's untouched beauty had reached Willow Creek. 3 young men, Jed, Marcus, and Kyle, known in the area for their petty cruelties and bored bravado, saw her isolation as an invitation. Their lives in Willow Creek were monotonous, filled with shifts at the lumber mill they often skipped and evenings at the Old Oak Bar, where cheap whiskey fueled their already inflated sense of entitlement. Jed, the eldest and most belligerent, considered himself the leader. His dark, unkempt hair poked out from under a baseball cap, his eyes perpetually bored, easily slipping into malice. Marcus, taller and clumsier, was his shadow, often nodding along to Jed's words, though with a vague unease in his gaze. Kyle, the youngest and quietest, kept his distance, his eyes darting, as if always searching for an escape or a distraction. One evening, as shadows lengthened and whiskey grew stronger, the talk turned to the forester's girl. Jed's words dripped with mockery as he described her secluded home, painting a picture of easy prey in their minds. To them, visiting the forester's daughter would be a lark, a chance to assert dominance over someone they deemed an easy target. It was more than mischief. It was a display of power, a way to banish boredom and prove to themselves and each other that they could do whatever they wanted without consequence. Marcus gave a nervous chuckle, while Kyle stared silently into his mug, but neither objected. The idea took root, morphing from a fleeting thought into a clear, vile plan. They left the bar, their steps resolute, their intentions dark, heading down the old forest road that led deep into the wilderness, toward Elias Thorne's cabin. As twilight descended, casting long shadows across the clearing before the cabin, Lena felt a prickle of unease. The forest's usual symphony seemed muted, replaced by an unnatural stillness. Normally, she'd hear the rustle of hedgehogs in the brush, the distant hoot of an owl, or the soft tread of a deer through the undergrowth. But tonight, the air was taut, like a drawn bowstring, and every sound that broke through felt foreign. Her senses, honed by years in the wild, detected something alien, a discordant note in the forest's perfect harmony.
It wasn't just a feeling, but a physical sensation, like a faint electric charge across her skin. Something was wrong. She couldn't pinpoint it, but her instincts, which had never failed her, screamed of danger. She moved with heightened awareness, her hand instinctively settling on the handle of the axe by the woodpile. The wood was smooth and cold, its weight familiar and reassuring. She listened, straining for any sound, any rustle that might explain her unease. The wind, usually playful, now seemed cautious, barely stirring the treetops. The birds, typically serenading the dusk, were silent. Even the stream, which always babbled carefree, seemed subdued, its sounds blending into the pervasive tension. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was an active silence, as if the forest held its breath, waiting. She glanced toward the old trail to Willow Creek, her eyes narrowing to pierce the gathering darkness. This sudden, inexplicable shift in the forest's voice was a warning, as ancient and undeniable as the first rustle of leaves that alerted a Neolithic hunter to danger. The human mind, over countless generations, had learned to interpret such subtle shifts, the silent language of survival, predating words and written history, echoing instincts that kept ancestors alive against unseen threats lurking just beyond the firelight. The silence that blanketed the forest wasn't merely an absence of sound. It was a tangible presence, a heavy veil that stifled even the usual rustle of leaves.
Lena's senses, sharpened by a lifetime in the wild, picked up on nuances that would elude most. The air, typically rich with the scent of pine and damp earth, now carried a faint, foreign tang, something metallic, something human, something out of place. It was barely perceptible, a whisper on the breeze, but it tugged at her primal instincts. She recalled her father's lessons, shared around crackling fires on cold nights. The forest always speaks, Lena. You just have to learn its language. And sometimes, its silence is the loudest warning of all. Elias hadn't always been the solitary guardian of this wilderness. Decades ago, he came to these mountains not as a native, but as a man seeking solace and purpose after a life that had, for a time, felt adrift. In his youth, he'd been a logger, witnessing the brutal efficiency of clear-cutting, the desecration of ancient groves for profit. That experience had carved a deep wound in his soul, leaving him disillusioned with humanity's relentless march. He'd seen the forest as a commodity, then as a victim, and finally as a sanctuary. He met Lena's mother, a woman as wild and free-spirited as the mountains, in a small, forgotten settlement further north. Their love was brief but intense, a meteor blazing across his life's vast canvas. She died when Lena was an infant, taken by a swift, unforgiving fever, leaving Elias with a tiny, vulnerable daughter and an even deeper bond to the untamed world that had been their shared haven. He raised Lena with the principles he lived by: self-reliance, respect for all living creatures, and unwavering vigilance against the destructive forces beyond their sanctuary. He taught her to read the tracks of deer and bear, to identify every edible plant and poisonous berry, to build a fire in a downpour, and to navigate by the stars. His lessons came not from books, but from the living, breathing textbook of the wilderness, an education far richer and more vital than any school could offer. Lena's world was one of profound connection. She knew the names of the towering Douglas firs shading their cabin, felt the pulse of the glacial stream against her bare feet in summer, and understood the nuanced calls of the ravens nesting high above. Her isolation wasn't loneliness. It was a deep, abiding communion with the natural world. She dreamt of the forest's ancient spirits, of towering stags with antlers like gnarled branches, and of swift rivers singing lullabies. Sometimes she'd sit for hours by the stream, watching water tumble over smooth stones, feeling the silent, immense power of the mountains around her. She wondered about the world beyond Willow Creek, a place her father rarely mentioned, but she felt no longing for it. Her identity was woven into the forest's fabric,
her spirit as untamed as the wind sweeping through the valleys. She knew the dangers too, the sudden fury of a grizzly, the silent menace of a cougar, the unforgiving bite of winter. But these were natural dangers, part of the balance, challenges to be met with skill and respect. The danger she sensed now was different, more insidious, carrying the unmistakable, unsettling scent of human intent. Meanwhile, Jed, Marcus, and Kyle trudged along the winding, overgrown path deeper into the woods. The cheap whiskey had dulled their senses, but sharpened their cruel resolve. Jed, swaggering slightly, led the way, his heavy boots crunching loudly on leaves and twigs, oblivious to how his steps announced their approach. "Just a little fun, boys," he slurred, grinning at Marcus, who trailed a step behind, his lanky frame hunched. "Forester's girl, all alone out here, probably desperate for some company." His laugh was harsh, grating, scraping against the forest's ancient silence. Marcus managed a weak, nervous chuckle, his eyes darting into the deepening shadows between the trees. He wasn't as eager as Jed, not truly. A knot of unease tightened in his stomach, a faint whisper of conscience he usually ignored. But Jed's approval, the fear of being mocked or excluded, was a powerful motivator. He'd seen Jed turn on others and didn't want to be next. He just wanted this over, to prove himself and return to the familiar, if dreary, comfort of the bar. He imagined Lena, perhaps timid, maybe even flattered by their attention, pushing away thoughts of her fear in favor of a more palatable fantasy of easy conquest. Kyle, trailing further back, said nothing. His silence was a shield, a way to avoid committing to anything explicitly. He didn't like this, not one bit. He'd heard stories about Elias Thorne, quiet whispers in town about the old man's uncanny way with animals, how he seemed to meld with the forest. And the girl, she was just a girl, living her life. But Jed's will was absolute, and Kyle knew resistance was futile. A creature of habit, he followed the path of least resistance, which now led deeper into the darkening woods toward a confrontation he instinctively dreaded. He clutched the cheap flask in his pocket, the whiskey's warmth a fleeting comfort against his growing apprehension. He tried to picture the forester's daughter as Jed described, an easy mark, a simple diversion. But the deeper they walked, the more the forest seemed to close in, its ancient, watchful presence prickling his skin. He felt like an intruder, not a conqueror, and the sensation was profoundly unsettling. The path narrowed, the trees grew denser, their branches interwoven overhead, swallowing the last vestiges of twilight. The air turned colder, heavier, carrying the damp scent of moss and decaying leaves. The men's voices, once loud and boisterous, quieted, replaced by the rhythmic crunch of boots and occasional nervous coughs. Even Jed seemed to feel the forest's weight, though he'd never admit it. He simply walked faster, his jaw set, determined to reach their destination before doubts could creep in. Lena, her hand still on the axe, shifted her weight, her eyes scanning the tree line. She heard them now, not clearly, but the clumsy rhythm of human footsteps, too heavy and irregular to be any animal. The faint, acrid smell of stale tobacco and cheap alcohol carried on a stray gust confirmed her fears. These weren't harmless hikers or lost travelers. These were the men her father had warned her about, who saw the wilderness not as a home, but as a place where rules didn't apply, where they could indulge their baser instincts without consequence. Her heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat in the stillness. But it wasn't just fear, it was a cold, sharp anger. This was her home, her sanctuary, and they were invading it. A vivid memory surfaced, a story her father had told many times, almost a legend in their quiet lives. It was from a winter Elias called the Long Hunger, a season of brutal cold and deep snows that decimated the deer population and left predators starving. Elias, then in his late 40s, had been on a long patrol, checking his territory for illegal trapping. The snow was hip-deep, the air so cold it burned his lungs. He'd been tracking a desperate coyote for 2 days, hoping to scare it away from a settler's chicken coop without violence. On the third day, as the sun dipped below the jagged peaks, casting long purple shadows, he found it. Not the coyote, but a wolf cub, barely 6 months old, caught in a cruel, rusty steel jaw trap. The trap, likely abandoned by a long-dead trapper or forgotten by a careless poacher, had done its work. The cub's left front leg was mangled, bone likely shattered, blood staining the snow a grotesque crimson. Its eyes, usually fierce, were wide with pain and terror, reflecting the dying light. Its whimpers, tiny and heart-wrenching, tore at Elias's core. The cub was exhausted, freezing, and in agony, its breath ragged. Elias knew the risk. A cornered wolf, even a cub, could be dangerous.
Its mother, if nearby, would be formidable, yet his respect for life outweighed fear. He reached for his hunting knife, not in aggression, but as a tool for a delicate task. He had to act fast. The cub wouldn't survive much longer. Moving slowly, he spoke in a low, soothing murmur, the kind used for nervous animals. "Easy now, little one. I'm not here to hurt you." The cub bared blood-flecked teeth, a primal snarl rumbling in its chest. Kneeling, ignoring the cold seeping through his trousers, Elias assessed the trap. It was vicious, designed to hold fast. The cub's leg was severely broken, likely beyond saving in the wild, but he had to try. Carefully, he worked the rusted springs, his calloused fingers navigating the cold metal. The cub whimpered, thrashing weakly, its eyes a mix of pain and bewildered understanding. Elias kept talking, his voice a steady anchor. After agonizing minutes, the trap's jaws released with a groan. The cub collapsed, panting, trembling. Elias examined the leg. It was bad. Taking it to the cabin wasn't an option. A wild wolf couldn't be domesticated, and its mother would be searching. But he couldn't leave it to die slowly either. From his emergency kit, he cleaned the wound with snow and a cloth, then fashioned a crude splint from a branch and shirt strips, binding the leg gently. The cub watched, its initial terror easing into weary trust, its eyes holding a flicker of curiosity. It needed food, and its mother. Elias recalled a fresh deer carcass a mile back, likely a cougar's kill, abandoned. Carrying the cub that far was impossible. He decided to leave it hidden, bring food, and hope the mother found it. Wrapping the shivering cub in his wool scarf, he tucked it into a hollow beneath a spruce, camouflaging it with branches. "Stay here, little one," he whispered, patting its head. Surprisingly, the cub didn't snap, only blinked, its eyes fixed on him. "I'll be back." He trekked to the carcass, the wind biting his face, and butchered a portion of meat, knowing its scent would draw the mother. Returning exhausted, he found the cub still alive. He placed the meat nearby, then retreated to a ridge to watch. He named the cub Ghost for its ethereal presence in the vast snowscape. Hours passed, the moon painting the snow in silver and shadow. Elias, numb with cold, stayed vigilant. Then he saw her, a large, gaunt she-wolf, eyes burning with desperate search. She moved with primal energy, nose to the ground. Finding the cub, she let out a mournful whimper of relief and sorrow, licking its leg, then feeding it the deer meat. Elias watched as she guided the cub away, their bond silent but powerful. He felt peace, a quiet triumph against nature's harshness. That moment of compassion had etched itself into his soul, deepening his connection to the wild. Back in the present, Lena's grip on the axe tightened, the steel cold against her racing heart. The sounds were closer, unmistakably human, heavy, clumsy. She heard crude laughter, slurred words on the evening air. Her father was out, likely checking traps or scouting migration signs, not back for hours. She was alone. Fear pierced her, but she pushed it down. Her father taught her to think, not panic. She was fast, agile, and knew every inch of the clearing and woods. This threat, born of human malice, was different from natural dangers. She was no victim. She moved silently toward the cabin door, eyes scanning for threats and escape routes. The cabin was sturdy, but not a fortress. Her best defense was surprise, terrain knowledge, and instincts.
Retreating to the woods was an option, but her home called her. She wouldn't abandon it. As she reached the door, 3 silhouettes emerged from the tree line, dark and menacing. Jed stepped forward, his voice cutting through the twilight.
Lena! Oh, Lena, girl! We know you're in there! His sneer, visible in the dim light, sent a shiver down her spine, his words laced with false joviality and menace. They spread out, blocking the path to Willow Creek, cutting off escape. Their movements were practiced, like hunters cornering prey. Marcus shifted nervously, his eyes darting. Kyle lingered back, his face unreadable but heavy with unease. Their predatory grins and clear intentions thickened the air with menace. Lena clutched the axe, its weight grimly comforting. She knew this was no game. Her isolation was her cage, and they were the hunters. Her mind raced, body tensed, ready to act. Jed stepped closer, his insolent stare crawling over her. "Come on out, pretty thing. No need to be shy. We just wanna chat." His words dripped with leering intent. Marcus snickered nervously. Kyle remained silent, his stillness ominous. Their predatory grins and clear intentions thickened the air with menace. Lena clutched the axe, its weight grimly comforting. She knew this was no game. Her isolation was her cage, and they were the hunters. Her mind raced, body tensed, ready to act. Jed stepped closer, his insolent stare crawling over her. "Come on out, pretty thing. No need to be shy. We just wanna chat." His words dripped with leering intent. Marcus snickered nervously. Kyle remained silent, his stillness ominous. Lena stood firm, axe raised defensively, heart pounding, but gaze steady, meeting Jed's stare with defiance. "Get out of here," she said, voice low and strong, momentarily halting Jed. "You don't belong here." Jed's sneer tightened. "Oh, we belong wherever we want, little Forrester. And right now, we want to be here, with you." He advanced, Marcus and Kyle fanning out, cutting off retreat. They aimed to intimidate, to render her helpless. But defiance ignited within her. This was her home, and they were defiling it. As Jed reached for her, a mournful howl pierced the twilight, close and resonant, vibrating through the ground. It froze the men, their bravado wavering. Jed's hand dropped, eyes scanning the tree line. Marcus gasped, pale. Kyle straightened, startled. "What was that?" Marcus stammered. Jed scoffed, voice trembling. "Just a lone wolf, nothing to worry about." But unease cracked his facade. The howl was different, authoritative. More howls joined, a chorus from multiple directions, a symphony of primal power. Eyes gleamed from the shadows, golden, amber, green. A pack of wolves emerged, not charging, but fanning out around the clearing, gazes fixed on the intruders. They moved with silent grace, their muscular forms blending with the forest. Their presence was overwhelming, led by a scarred alpha with piercing eyes fixed on Jed. The men's courage evaporated, replaced by terror. They were trapped between Lena, her axe, and the predators. Jed, trembling, recognized the alpha, Ghost, the wolf Elias saved, its scarred eye and subtle limp unmistakable. Marcus whimpered, legs weak. Kyle's eyes were wide, fixed on the wolves. The air crackled with primal tension, fear thick in the clearing. Ghost stepped forward, a low growl commanding, not aggressive, but authoritative. The pack's presence was an undeniable threat, their message clear: leave, never return. This was their domain, not to be disturbed. The men froze, faces ashen, eyes darting. The forest, once welcoming, was now a terrifying wall. Jed felt primal dread,
realizing this was a reckoning. With trembling hands raised, they backed away, clumsy and humiliated, disappearing into the darkness, their vile intentions shattered. Lena watched them vanish, relief and awe washing over her. She turned to Ghost, their gazes meeting in silent understanding. A debt repaid, a trust reaffirmed. The wolf recognized Elias's daughter. With a final nod, Ghost and the pack melted into the shadows, leaving the clearing quiet under the moonlight. Lena's grip on the axe loosened, awe and gratitude warming her chest. Her father's compassion had protected her, a testament to the unseen connections binding all life.